Harassment incident stuns Mexico nation. Shocking scene in Mexico City. President Claudia Sheinbaum groped and harassed by man during public event. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum experienced a disturbing incident on Tuesday when a man groped her and attempted to kiss her without consent during a public appearance in Mexico City. Footage that quickly spread across social media shows the president walking through a historic street, greeting supporters when a man approaches her closely. Now let's explore this story from every angle on the AI podcast.
So welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be digging into a set of sources that honestly, they detail a really painful incident in Mexico. But it's essential we talk about it. It started as, well, what looked like maybe just a security issue involving the country's new president. But it immediately spiraled into something much bigger, a kind of national reckoning on gender safety, on these really deep cultural issues. Our focus is Claudia Sheinbaum, Mexico's first female president, which, is historic, hugely historic. But our mission here, what we're trying to understand, is how this one single really disturbing public assault against her forced the whole country, really, to confront systemic gender inequality, that whole culture of machismo. We want to go beyond just the attack itself and really analyze why the public outcry was so immediate, so profound.
Yeah, and the symbolism is just, it's unavoidable, isn't it? I mean, Sheinbaum, she breaks the highest glass ceiling there is in Mexican politics, a truly monumental moment. You think, progress, right, yes. But then this happens. And so quickly, it just lays bare the reality that the dangers women face every day, from harassment on the street right up to assault, these things don't just disappear because you achieve high office, status, political power. It seems it doesn't offer a shield, not from this kind of gendered violence anyway.
Okay, so let's paint the picture of the incident itself. The sources are pretty detailed, quite graphic, actually. This wasn't some formal state event, right? It happened during a public meet and greet in Mexico City. She's apparently adopted this very accessible style, much like Lopez Obrador, her mentor. Out there shaking hands, taking selfies with people in the crowd, trying to be open. And that openness, that's exactly where the vulnerability came in, it seems. Cameras caught the whole thing, which is just chilling. So during one of these moments, interacting with someone, a man suddenly leans right in towards her. His first move was trying to kiss her on the neck, without any consent, obviously. That alone is shocking, that violation of space. But it got worse, really fast.
That's the really critical part, the escalation. It didn't stop there. The man then puts both his hands squarely on her chest, groping her in public, in front of everyone, cameras rolling, security nearby. It was just unbelievably brazen, a clear act of sexual harassment aimed right at the head of state.
It's hard to even process that image, the president of Mexico, having to physically deal with someone groping her while she's surrounded by cameras and presumably her security team. The sheer entitlement of the attacker is just staggering.
And that brings us to her reaction, which I think is maybe the most telling part of this whole story. So she's being physically violated, right, while performing her duties. But the sources describe her maintaining this strained smile. She gently pushes his hands away, and then, incredibly, she tries to diffuse it herself. She calmly says something like, "Let's take the photo, don't worry," trying to smooth it over. And this is where you really see the intersection of, security expectations and maybe deeper cultural conditioning. That smile, that composure. It wasn't just professionalism, was it? Analysts pointed out it looked like a performance, almost a learned role. It kind of highlights the incredible emotional labor women, especially powerful women, are often expected to perform, managing the aggressor's ego, calming the situation down, rather than expressing maybe justifiable anger or shock. She prioritized neutralizing him over demanding her own protection in that instant.
Which really should have been the security team's job, shouldn't it? Instantly.
Yeah.
Did the sources get into the failure of her protection detail? Because that delay seems just as significant as her reaction.
Oh, absolutely. That's a huge piece of the narrative. Security personnel only moved in after President Sheinbaum had already dealt with it, after she removed his hands, after she tried to de-escalate. And this raises some really serious questions that go beyond just, maybe simple incompetence or slow reflexes. Was it poor training? Or, and this is the more uncomfortable question, is there some kind of deeper institutional bias, a failure to see this kind of gender-based violation as a primary security threat?
You mean like maybe they initially saw the groping as what?
Yeah.
Low-level harassment, not an immediate physical threat to the head of state, which it absolutely was.
Precisely. That's the implication, isn't it? Think about it. If that man had pulled out a weapon, any kind of weapon, the response would likely have been immediate, overwhelming.
Right. But because the violation was sexual harassment, groping, it seems the response was slower, more measured, almost hesitant.
Yeah.
And the message that sends, even if it's unintentional, is just devastating. It suggests that even for the president, this kind of assault is somehow normalized, to the point where she's almost expected to handle it herself first. Now, local media did report the man was arrested soon after. He was apparently intoxicated. But the damage was done. That failure to protect her in the moment became the real story.
And the public saw that immediately. You could feel it online. Social media just exploded. Not just shock at the assault itself, but real disbelief and anger about how weak, how delayed the security response looked. Yeah, the sources picked up on that surge of feeling. Lots of user reactions quoted. One comment that apparently went viral was something like, "If Mexico can't keep its president safe, how can it keep anyone safe?" Makes you think, doesn't it? And another user really hit that point hard. Incredible, a man groped the president of Mexico in public. Even more incredible was the weak response from her security. People felt that failure. It wasn't just a procedural lapse. It felt like it confirmed this awful feeling that ultimately women are often on their own when it comes to this stuff.
And while Sheinbaum's own office, interestingly, stayed pretty quiet, maybe strategically, not wanting to amplify it further, other official bodies didn't. The institutional condemnation came pretty quickly, and it was unified. And that was crucial because it validated the public's outrage. It immediately helped frame this not just as a security breach, but as part of a wider gender crisis.
Right. And it wasn't just one group speaking out, was it? It seemed quite coordinated. The sources mentioned a joint statement, bringing together quite a few key organizations.
Yes, exactly. It was a powerful coalition. You had the country's main women's secretariat involved, plus various women's institutes, and even the gender equality commissions from both chambers of the legislature, the Senate and the Chamber of Deputies. They understood this needed a collective voice, a societal response, not just a political one. And their statement really set the tone. It connected the dots explicitly. It provided that essential context, linking the attack on Sheinbaum to the everyday reality for millions. There was this one key line they released that just, it hit hard. It resonated everywhere. They said, "Unfortunately, no woman is exempt from experiencing sexual harassment in our country, which is why we work daily to combat it."
Wow. That phrase, "no woman is exempt," that really says it all, doesn't it? The highest office in Mexico offers no protection from this. So the incident itself was deeply disturbing. How do the sources then connect this specific attack to the broader, more endemic issues in Mexican society? Let's talk about machismo and the scale of gender violence.
Right. This is where the analysis really deepens, because machismo isn't just, toxic masculinity as a buzzword. It's described as this deep-rooted cultural system, a system of male entitlement, male dominance, that really shapes social interactions, political structures, and, tragically, fuels violence. This incident with Sheinbaum, it was like a public performance of that entitlement. The attacker felt he had the right to put his hands on the most powerful woman in the country. And the sources are very clear. This specific type of harassment, this assault, it sits on a spectrum, a terrifyingly wide spectrum of gender-based violence in Mexico. It ranges from the kind of constant low-level street harassment that women navigate all the time, which is essentially what happened to Sheinbaum, albeit in a very high-profile way, all the way up to the most extreme, lethal forms of violence. We're talking about acid attacks, disfigurement, and, of course, femicides. The murder of women simply because they are women.
It's important we give listeners some context on that scale. Femicides in Mexico, the numbers are stark, aren't they?
They are truly devastating. The sources consistently cite figures showing that, on average, around 10 women or girls are murdered every single day in Mexico. And these murders often happen in a climate of, impunity, lack of justice. So that statistic, it puts the harassment Sheinbaum faced into perspective. It's one manifestation, one point on a continuum of violence that haunts the country. The public outrage wasn't just about protecting the president. It was this collective cry against that constant pervasive threat that affects everyone.
And this environment, this culture, it must create a really difficult situation for President Sheinbaum personally, right? It forces this debate about her political style, that trade-off between being accessible, being one of the people, and basic safety. Accessibility was a big part of her campaign promise, wasn't it? Following Obrador's populist approach.
Exactly. She wants to be seen as approachable, out there with the crowds. And this is the crucial point in a culture with such high levels of machismo and gender violence, that accessibility takes on entirely different risks for a female leader compared to a male one. Her male predecessors could wade into crowds, shake hands, take selfies, without facing that same pervasive underlying threat of sexual assault. It just wasn't the same kind of danger for them. She, on the other hand, has to constantly weigh her political identity, her desire to connect, against her own physical safety. And that calculation is fundamentally shaped by her gender in that specific role and culture. It's a burden male leaders simply don't carry in the same way.
We also need to remember the wider context here. The political climate itself. The sources point out this assault didn't happen in a vacuum. Mexico was already dealing with significant political violence. In fact, just days before this incident, Sheinbaum had been publicly addressing concerns after a mayor was assassinated in Michoacan state earlier that same week.
So you see the layers of threat she's navigating. Simultaneously, there's the threat of targeted political violence, assassination attempts, attacks on officials, which is a real risk, and then layered on top of that is the constant background radiation, if you will, of gender-based violence, harassment, assault purely because she is a woman. It's this kind of dual threat matrix, and it must be absolutely overwhelming.
It really just hammers home that central, painful point that came out of the public reaction. Even being the most powerful woman in Mexico doesn't make you immune. Not immune to basic sexual harassment, to groping, in a country that's still fighting so hard for fundamental gender safety and respect. So the incident becomes this really potent public symbol, a symbol of the universal challenges women face, no matter how high they climb. So wrapping up this deep dive, I think it's become incredibly clear how one shocking, very public moment just instantly brought a huge, long-standing national struggle into sharp focus. It confirms really starkly that for women, even those in the highest positions of power with status, fame, political achievement, none of that automatically translates into basic physical safety.
And that brings us right back to the core issue, and maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. Mexico celebrated, quite rightly, this monumental step forward, electing its first female president, a huge symbol of progress. But almost immediately, that symbolic victory crashed against the hard reality of gender violence. So the question to consider is this. What does it tell us about the psychological weight, the political pressure, embedded in President Sheinbaum's decision, that calculated choice to maintain composure, to try and manage the situation herself, instead of being able to rely on a security system that, in that moment, clearly failed her? That instinctive reaction, that need to de-escalate personally, maybe that tells us everything about the profound, often invisible burden placed on women in leadership everywhere, especially when the systems meant to protect them don't fully recognize or respond to the specific gendered threats they face.
This is shocking. Okay, one question for you. How could a man get close enough to grope the president of Mexico despite heavy security? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.